I want to start with Nancy. Nancy is 68, from a small town outside Des Moines. She came to see me because she'd been constipated on and off for years, and somewhere along the way, she'd landed on a laxative from the pharmacy that worked. It worked well, so she kept using it. Most days, actually, not just when she needed it. Here's what worried her enough to bring it up. She'd read online that the laxative she was using could permanently damage her colon, that the nerves in her gut would burn out, that the changes were irreversible. She'd read the words, cathartic colon, and sat with that phrase for a week before she said anything to anyone. I want you to notice something about that story because it's going to matter for the next 20 minutes. Nancy didn't come in because she was constipated. She came in because she was frightened, genuinely frightened, by something she'd read about a medication a lot of people, including plenty of my own patients, use safely all the time. So today I want to do two things. First, I want to give you an honest, accurate picture of what that laxative actually does. Not the scariest version, not the dismissive version, the real one. And second, I want to walk you through a food-based approach that genuinely helps a great many people, one that's better supported by research than you might expect, including one piece of it that surprised me when I looked into it properly. I'm Dr. Clark, and if there's one thing I hope you take from today, it's this. You deserve accurate information about your own gut, not the version that's designed to alarm you into watching to the end. Let's get into it. Let's talk about senna, because I think it's been badly misrepresented, and I want to set the record straight. Senna is a plant-based laxative, sold over the counter, and it's been used for a very long time. It's derived from the leaves of the senna plant, and it contains compounds called anthraquinone glycosides. Here's how it actually works. Once those compounds reach your large intestine, gut bacteria convert them into their active form, and that active form irritates the nerve endings in the wall of your colon just enough to trigger a contraction. For a lot of people, in the short term, this genuinely works, and works well. So far, nothing controversial. This is a real, understood mechanism, and it's why senna has remained a trusted over-the-counter option for so long. Here's where it gets more serious, and where I want to be completely honest with you rather than picking a side to make a better story. Your gut has its own nervous system, genuinely. It's sometimes called the second brain, and it behaves in some ways like any other nervous system. It can adapt to a repeated signal. If you use senna regularly, over a long period, it can cause a genuine, visible change in the colon called melanosis coli. The wall of the colon takes on a darker, brownish pigment, sometimes visible on colonoscopy as a distinctly darker lining than normal. This is real. It's a real, well-documented, correctly named condition, and doctors do see it on colonoscopy in people who've used senna for a long time. I don't want to downplay that it's a real, observable change in your body. But here's what I want you to hear clearly, because this is the part that gets left out. Melanosis coli is benign, and it's reversible. It is not a sign of permanent nerve damage. It's a pigment change, something closer to a bruise than a scar, and research following patients after they stop senna shows it fades. In one case that was followed carefully, a woman who'd used senna for 5 years had her melanosis coli essentially resolve within about 7 months of stopping. A broader review of this condition describes it clearing up gradually over roughly a year once the laxative is discontinued. So where did the idea of permanent, irreversible damage come from? I looked into this because I think it matters. The concern about actual nerve damage from senna traces back mostly to a small number of extreme cases. The most cited one is a woman who had misused senna for 40 years, and another study that looked at patients taking something like 18 times the recommended dose for an average of over 13 years. That's not someone using a tablet occasionally, or even someone using it daily as directed. That's decades of massive overdose. A more recent, careful review of the evidence, published in a respected gastroenterology journal, concluded there isn't convincing evidence that senna, used as intended, causes lasting structural damage to the nerves or muscles of the gut. And senna remains approved for over-the-counter use precisely because, at normal doses, it has a good safety record. I want to be fair and balanced about this because I'm not telling you to use senna every single day for the rest of your life without a second thought either. Here's the honest, middle position, and it's the one I actually practice. Senna is a reasonable option for occasional or short-term use, when fiber and water and gentler approaches haven't been enough. What I'd be cautious about is using it as your only strategy, every day, indefinitely, without ever addressing why your gut needs that nudge in the first place. Not because it's secretly destroying you, but because there are gentler, more sustainable tools that address the underlying issue, which is really what I want to spend the rest of our time on today. And if you're someone like Nancy, who's been quietly worried about something you read, I hope that gives you something solid to stand on. If you use a stimulant laxative sometimes and it helps you, that's not a crisis. If you've been leaning on it every single day for years, that's worth a conversation with your own doctor about whether something gentler could work just as well, not out of fear, but because it's worth understanding what's actually going on underneath. Before I give you the protocol, I want you to understand the machinery, because it makes every piece of what follows make sense. Your digestive tract moves things along through a wave-like muscular motion called peristalsis, a coordinated squeeze that travels down the length of your intestine, pushing contents toward the exit. When those waves slow down, lose their coordination, or in some cases become chaotic rather than organized, that's constipation. It's rarely one single cause. It's usually some mix of not enough fiber, not enough fluid, muscles that aren't contracting in a coordinated rhythm, and sometimes medications that slow things down without you realizing it. Here's a piece that surprises people. A significant amount of constipation isn't actually a sluggish colon. It's a colon that's overcontracting, squeezing in a disorganized way that doesn't produce useful forward movement. Think of it like a poorly conducted orchestra. Plenty of activity, but nothing coordinated enough to move the piece forward. That distinction matters because it tells you the fix isn't just stimulate more contraction. Sometimes what your gut actually needs is to relax into a more coordinated rhythm. This is exactly why a stimulant laxative, which does nothing but force more contraction, can feel like the obvious answer while actually working against the underlying problem for a lot of people. And dehydration plays a bigger role than most people realize. As waste moves through your large intestine, your colon pulls water out of it. That's completely normal, and it's actually one of your colon's main jobs. But if you're chronically a little low on fluids, your body shifts into a kind of conservation mode, and your colon pulls out more water than it should, leaving you with something dry and dense that's genuinely harder to move. It can end up sitting against the wall of the intestine rather than moving smoothly along. Constipation and mild chronic dehydration are very often the same problem wearing two different faces, which is exactly why the very next thing I want to cover is water, before we even get to food. I want to name one more factor before we move on, because it doesn't get talked about enough. Your nervous system and your gut are in constant conversation. Stress, poor sleep, and simply being rushed in the morning can genuinely tighten up that peristaltic rhythm and make things worse, independent of anything you eat or drink. I'm not going to spend today's video on stress management, but if you've tried every food-based fix and things still aren't moving well, it's worth asking yourself honestly whether your mornings are rushed, whether you're actually giving yourself time to use the bathroom without hurrying, and whether stress more broadly might be part of your picture. Sometimes the missing ingredient isn't nutritional at all. With all of that in mind, let's talk about what actually helps, starting with the simplest piece. The simplest, lowest cost piece of this whole approach is also one of the most effective, and it costs you nothing. First thing in the morning, before coffee, before breakfast, before anything, drink about half a liter of warm water, slowly, not gulp down all at once. Here's why warm water specifically and why first thing matters. When your stomach fills, it triggers something called the gastrocolic reflex, an automatic, built-in signal that tells your large intestine to start moving. This is very likely why a lot of people feel the urge to use the bathroom shortly after their morning coffee. It's not really the caffeine doing that work, it's the warm liquid filling your stomach. You can get the same reflex without the caffeine, and for some people, caffeine on an already sensitive stomach isn't ideal anyway. Sip it, don't gulp it. Give your stomach a few minutes to actually receive it before you move on with your morning. Now let's build the main piece of this protocol, and I want to explain not just what to use, but why the method matters as much as the ingredient. Flaxseed is the foundation. It contains two different types of fiber, and they do genuinely different jobs. Soluble fiber, when it meets water, forms a thick, gel-like substance. That gel is the active ingredient here, and it coats and soothes the lining of your gut on its way through. Insoluble fiber doesn't dissolve. Instead, it adds gentle bulk that provides a mild mechanical nudge to the colon wall, encouraging those coordinated contractions we talked about. Together, they create a slow, steady, physiologically normal kind of movement. Not a spasm, just ordinary healthy motility. Here's where most people go wrong, and it genuinely changes the result. Eating flaxseed dry gives you very little of this benefit. Dry seeds are hard, poorly digested, and can actually be a bit abrasive on the way through. You need to soak them. The method: take 2 tablespoons of whole flaxseed, cover them generously with room temperature water, and let them sit overnight, at least 8 to 10 hours. If you're going to soak them longer than about a day, move the bowl into the refrigerator, because left too long at room temperature, they'll start to ferment, which works against you rather than for you. One detail that matters more than people expect: don't pour off the soaking liquid. During that overnight soak, the soluble fiber leaches out into the water around the seeds, forming that therapeutic gel. If you drain it away, you've thrown out a good portion of the benefit. Use the seeds and the liquid together. Add sesame seeds to the same idea. Soak them too, though you can rinse these afterward, unlike the flax. Sesame brings calcium to the table, which is genuinely relevant here, not just a nutritional footnote. Calcium is directly involved in how your smooth muscle, including the muscle in your intestinal wall, contracts. Sesame also carries zinc, vitamin E, and some healthy fats that support the general integrity of your gut lining. If you don't have flaxseed on hand, chia seeds are a reasonable substitute. Same basic gel-forming mechanism, and they soak much faster, about 30 minutes rather than overnight. Once you've got your soaked flax, with its liquid, and rinsed sesame, here's what goes into the blender with them, and why each piece earns its place. Berries, any kind: blueberries, raspberries, strawberries. Berries bring pectin, another soluble fiber with a genuinely well-documented calming effect on gut inflammation, plus anthocyanins, the deep-colored pigments that also act as antioxidants protecting the cells lining your gut. 3 or 4 prunes. Prunes have been used for this purpose for a very long time, and the mechanism is well understood. They contain sorbitol, a natural sugar alcohol that draws water into your intestine, softening stool from the inside. They also contain compounds that directly encourage peristalsis. This is one of the better supported pieces of the whole protocol. A banana, ripe or slightly underripe. Each version brings something different. Banana provides potassium, which your smooth muscle needs to function well. Low potassium can genuinely slow things down. A slightly underripe banana also contains resistant starch, a type of carbohydrate your small intestine can't break down, so it travels intact to your colon, where it becomes food for your beneficial gut bacteria. Fresh greens, parsley, cilantro, spinach, whatever you have on hand. Greens bring folate, vitamin K, and magnesium. I want to spend an extra moment on magnesium because it does something that sounds backwards at first. Magnesium relaxes smooth muscle. You might think a constipation remedy should make the muscle contract harder, not relax it. But remember what we said earlier, that a lot of constipation is actually an over-contracted, disorganized colon rather than a sluggish one. Magnesium helps calm that chaotic squeezing into a coordinated rhythm, and it also draws water into the intestine osmotically, softening stool at the same time. Turmeric and cinnamon at minimum. Turmeric contains curcumin, which is genuinely one of the most extensively studied natural anti-inflammatory compounds we have. It's been looked at specifically for its effects on gut inflammation and motility, and the direction of the research is consistently favorable. Cinnamon has a mild calming effect on the gut and may help with bloating. Cardamom, if you have it. It's been used across a number of traditional systems of medicine for digestive complaints for a very long time, and modern research on it is genuinely supportive. It appears to help relieve mild nausea, encourage the secretion of digestive enzymes, and ease intestinal cramping. It's a nice, gentle addition if it's in your spice cabinet. Add a small splash of hot water before blending. This isn't just for texture. Cold foods and liquids tend to slow gut motility a little. Warm ones tend to support it. This is a genuine, direct effect of temperature on smooth muscle behavior, not just a matter of comfort. You want the finished smoothie to be warm, not cold. And at the very end, 1 to 2 tablespoons of a good cold-pressed oil, like olive oil. This does 2 things. It lubricates the intestinal wall, easing the movement of stool, and it helps you actually absorb the fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, coming from the greens and berries. Without any fat present, a fair amount of those vitamins simply pass through unused. Blend it all together until smooth, and that's your morning. This isn't meant to replace a full breakfast, but as a daily addition, it's a genuinely reasonable food-based habit. One honest note about packaged fiber supplements. The source material this is based on dismissed products like psyllium husk entirely, and I don't think that's fair. Psyllium is genuinely well supported by real clinical research and is considered a legitimate first-line option by real digestive health guidelines. The actual failure mode isn't the fiber itself. It's taking dry fiber without enough water alongside it, which can occasionally make things feel worse rather than better. If you take a fiber supplement, just make sure you're drinking a full glass of water with it, every time. Here's a piece of this I want to spend real time on, because when I looked into the research behind it, I was honestly impressed. This is better supported by actual clinical trials than most things I cover on this channel. There's a real body of research on mineral water that's naturally rich in magnesium and sulfate for exactly this purpose. Several double-blind, placebo-controlled studies, the gold standard of clinical research, have tested waters like this in people with ongoing constipation and found real, measurable improvement in stool consistency and how often people had a bowel movement, with a good safety profile. One well-known example is a French mineral water called Hepar. Another studied water is called Donat MG. Both are naturally high in magnesium and sulfate, and both work the same way we just talked about, osmotically drawing water into the bowel and helping ease that chaotic overcontraction into something more coordinated. Interestingly, one of these trials found that the effect took a little time to show up. It wasn't dramatic in the first few days, but became clearly noticeable after about 2 consistent weeks of use. That fits with everything else I've told you today. This whole approach rewards patience and consistency far more than it rewards intensity on day 1. If you want to try this specifically, look for a natural mineral water with a labeled high mineral content. You're looking for the total dissolved mineral content, sometimes listed as mineralization, ideally in a range that's genuinely classified as a medicinal or therapeutic water rather than an everyday table water. There's also a well-known tradition of this in Eastern European medical practice. Mineral waters like Essentuki, a Russian brand you may have heard of if you or your family have roots there, have been used medicinally for digestive complaints for well over a century, and the numbered varieties simply reflect different mineral concentrations. 1 or 2 glasses on an empty stomach, in the morning, during a stretch when you're genuinely constipated, is a reasonable way to use it. I do want to add a caution here because it's an important one. This kind of high mineral water is a therapeutic tool for an active episode, not something to drink in large quantities every single day. The added mineral load, especially sodium and magnesium in higher concentrations, is something to be mindful of if you have high blood pressure or any kidney condition. For everyday hydration, stick with regular drinking water. One note on bottles. Glass versus plastic packaging for mineral water is a reasonable general preference. Plastic can release small amounts of certain compounds into liquids over time, and it's a sensible habit to prefer glass where it's convenient. I'll say plainly that a specific claim you may have seen floating around, that people ingest something like a credit card's worth of microplastic every week, has been reviewed carefully by independent researchers and does not hold up. The original estimate was based on a flawed calculation, and more careful follow-up work suggests the real number is dramatically smaller. So choose glass because it's a sensible, simple preference, not because of a frightening statistic that isn't actually accurate. I think of a patient, Patricia, 66, from outside Sacramento, who'd struggled with constipation for years and had cycled through nearly every laxative on the pharmacy shelf, never quite landing on something that felt sustainable. Some worked for a while and then seemed to stop working as well. Others left her with cramping she didn't love. She was also, understandably, nervous about long-term laxative use after reading some frightening things online, much like Nancy. We sat down and talked through what her mornings actually looked like. She wasn't drinking much of anything before her afternoon coffee. Her diet leaned heavily on processed, low-fiber foods most days, and she'd never really thought about her gut as something that responded to rhythm and consistency rather than a single fix. So we built her mornings around the basics: the warm water first thing, the soaked flax and sesame smoothie, and we found a mineral water locally that fit what we were looking for, which she used for the first couple of weeks while things got moving properly. Within about 5 days, she noticed real, meaningful improvement. Less bloating, more regular movement, less of that heavy, uncomfortable feeling she'd been carrying around for years. Over the following months, she found she needed the mineral water less and less, and eventually didn't need any laxative at all most weeks. Her words to me were, "I didn't realize how much of my day I'd been organizing around this." I want to be honest, this isn't a 5-minute fix, and it isn't universal. Some people need more than food and water changes, and that's completely normal too, particularly if there's an underlying condition or a medication involved. But for a genuine subset of people whose constipation is driven by the ordinary combination of low fiber, mild dehydration, and disorganized gut motility, this kind of approach can make a real, lasting difference. And it did for Patricia. I want to be very direct about something because I haven't seen another video on this exact topic mention it, and I think that's a real gap. Not all constipation is the everyday food and hydration kind. There are specific signs that mean you should see your doctor rather than trying a home protocol first, and I want you to genuinely hear these. Blood in your stool, whether bright red or dark and tarry. Unintentional weight loss alongside your constipation. A sudden new change in your bowel habits that's different from your usual pattern, especially if you're over 50 and this is genuinely new for you. Severe abdominal pain, especially if it comes with fever, vomiting, or a swollen, hard abdomen. And constipation that simply doesn't respond at all to a week or two of a reasonable effort like the one I've described today. Any of those, please don't try to work through it with a smoothie. That's a phone call to your doctor, not a home project. I also want to mention something that gets missed constantly. A lot of constipation in adults our age is actually caused by medication, opioid pain medications, iron supplements, certain blood pressure medications, and several others can slow your gut down as a side effect. If your constipation started or got noticeably worse around the same time you started a new medication, that's worth raising directly with whoever prescribed it, because sometimes the real fix is a medication adjustment, not a dietary one. Let me get ahead of a few questions I know are coming. How long can I use this smoothie approach? Indefinitely, honestly. Unlike a stimulant laxative, there's no dependency mechanism here. You're not irritating nerve receptors into adapting. You're simply providing your gut with fiber, fluid, and the minerals it needs to function well. Plenty of people make some version of this a permanent daily habit rather than a temporary fix. What if I have diverticulosis? Is flaxseed safe? For most people with diverticulosis, yes. The old advice to avoid seeds and nuts entirely has largely been set aside by current digestive health guidance, since it was never well supported to begin with. That said, if you've had an active flare of diverticulitis recently, or your doctor has given you specific dietary instructions, follow those over anything you hear from me. Can I use this alongside my regular laxative? In most cases, yes, this isn't an either-or. Many people use this kind of approach specifically to reduce how often they need a stimulant laxative, rather than replacing it overnight. Go at whatever pace feels sustainable for you. What about children or pregnant women? I want to be direct here. This video is aimed at adults managing ordinary, everyday constipation. Pregnancy changes the picture meaningfully. Some of what we've discussed today, including senna and high mineralization water, isn't appropriate during pregnancy without your obstetrician's specific guidance. Please don't extend today's advice to a pregnant family member without checking with her own doctor first. A few things I see people get wrong, worth protecting against. Eating flaxseed dry. As we covered, this gives you a fraction of the benefit and can be mildly abrasive. Soak it, and don't pour off the liquid. Assuming any stimulant laxative is either perfectly safe or secretly destroying you. Neither extreme is accurate. Occasional or short-term use of something like senna is a reasonable option. Leaning on it as your only daily strategy indefinitely, without addressing the underlying picture, is worth revisiting with your doctor, not out of fear, but because there's usually a gentler, more sustainable path available. Drinking high mineralization water every day is a regular habit, rather than using it as a targeted tool during an active episode. More is not automatically better here, especially if you have blood pressure or kidney concerns. Ignoring the medication question. If constipation showed up around the same time as a new prescription, that's worth a direct conversation before assuming it's purely a diet issue. Expecting an overnight fix and giving up on day 2. This is a genuinely common one. The research on the mineral water alone showed the real effect took roughly 2 weeks to become clear. If you try this for a day or two, don't feel a dramatic difference, and conclude it doesn't work for you, you may be abandoning something that simply needed more consistency than you gave it. And the big one, pushing through red flag symptoms with a home remedy. Blood, unexplained weight loss, a sudden change in pattern, or severe pain deserve a doctor's attention, not a week of smoothies. Let me bring this together simply. In the morning, before anything else, half a liter of warm water, sipped slowly. Then your flax and sesame smoothie, built with whatever berries, prunes, banana, greens, and spices you have on hand, blended warm, finished with a bit of good oil. If you're in an active stretch of constipation, a glass or two of a genuinely high mineral water on an empty stomach can help things along. Give it several consistent days, the effect builds gradually rather than all at once, so don't expect a dramatic change on day 1. By day 2 or 3, a lot of people notice the bloating and heaviness starting to ease. By day 4 or 5, more active, regular movement. And one more honest note on age. After about 45, gut motility naturally slows a bit, enzyme production dips, and nerve sensitivity in the gut wall diminishes somewhat. That's normal aging, not disease, but it does mean the timeline for this kind of approach may reasonably be longer and require more consistency than it would for someone in their 20s or 30s. Be patient with it. 1. Tonight, soak 2 tablespoons of whole flaxseed in room temperature water, and if you have sesame seeds, soak those separately. Leave both overnight, at least 8 hours. 2. Tomorrow morning, before anything else, before coffee, before checking your phone, drink half a liter of warm water, slowly, giving your stomach a few minutes to actually receive it. 3. Build your smoothie with the soaked seeds and their liquid, whatever fruit and greens you have on hand, turmeric and cinnamon at minimum, a splash of hot water, and a bit of good oil at the very end. Blend until smooth and drink it warm. 4. If you currently use a stimulant laxative like Senna every single day, bring that up with your own doctor at your next visit, not out of alarm, but to talk through whether a gentler, more sustainable approach could work just as well for you specifically, and whether there's an underlying cause worth addressing. 5. If you have any of the red flag symptoms we covered, blood, unexplained weight loss, a sudden change in your pattern, or severe pain, please call your doctor before trying anything else in this video. 6. Give whatever you start at least a full week of real consistency before deciding whether it's working. As we discussed, this approach rewards patience far more than intensity. I want to leave you with the same thing I told Nancy. You don't need to be frightened of a medication you may already be using safely, and you don't need anything exotic to genuinely support your gut. A soaked handful of seeds, some fruit, a bit of warm water in the morning, done consistently, is a real, well-supported place to start. I think what matters most from today isn't any single ingredient, it's the underlying idea. Your gut isn't broken, and it isn't working against you. It's responding, reasonably, to whatever combination of fluid, fiber, movement, and rhythm you're actually giving it. Change those inputs consistently, and for a great many people, it responds in kind. That's a much more hopeful picture than the one where your gut has failed you and you need something aggressive to force it back into line. If this was useful to you, share it with someone who's been quietly dealing with this. It's one of those topics people don't bring up easily, even with close family, and your sharing it might be exactly what gets them the right information instead of something designed to scare them. Leave me a comment and let me know how your mornings have been going, or which part of today's video was new to you. I read every comment, and I mean that. And one last important note. Everything I've shared today is meant to inform you, not replace your own doctor. If you have kidney disease, high blood pressure, or you're on regular medication, please talk through any changes, including the mineral water and any adjustment to a laxative you currently use, with your own doctor first. And if anything I described today, especially the red flag symptoms, applies to you right now, please don't wait for a follow-up video to act on it. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.